Okay, folks, let's begin. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Results UK's Grassroots Conference call for September. I hope you're all keeping very well. Those of you that don't know me, if you hadn't had a chance to meet yet, my name's Aaron Oxley. I'm the Executive Director of Results UK, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our monthly Grassroots Conference call this evening. As always, we are recording the call, that's so we can post the recording on our website for anyone who has missed the call to catch up on it. So please do feel free to turn your video off if you'd rather not be in the recording. We're also using automatic captions, which you should be able to turn on and off for yourself using the Zoom menu bar. I saw those being turned on just a second ago, so we should be good there. So let's start with a big warm welcome to anyone who's new to Results and who's joining this call for the first time tonight. We like to ask new folks if they're comfortable to do so to introduce themselves, either by turning your microphone on and saying hello, or you can just use the chat box. Just be great to hear where you're calling in from. And of course, it's okay not to, just whatever you feel more comfortable with. Is there anybody that's new tonight that wants to say hello? Hello, Laura from Manchester. It's a great part of the country. I do know where Manchester is and what that's about, as opposed to the big onion of Birmingham. It's great to have you with us tonight. Anybody else want to say hi? No? Okay, cool. Thank you, everybody. As always, last little piece of housekeeping. I'd like to ask everybody to keep themselves muted during the call. Improves the call quality for everyone. And if you've got a question or comment, please do feel free to use the chat box at any time. We'll try to respond to that. We've got some people watching it. And of course, if we've got any questions that you want for our guest speaker, start to pile them up there, and we'll take a look at those when we get to that section of the meeting. But first, we're going to start with my usual update on what's been going on in the world of international development. It forms the backdrop to the work that we are doing as Results to bring an end to global poverty. So first of all, the most obvious thing that's been on all of our TV screens and news feeds this month is Afghanistan. Now, Results doesn't work specifically on humanitarian or security situations, but we are really concerned for people in that country, particularly women and girls. Many believe that there's a real risk of women and girls having their rights reduced or removed, and particularly for us, their right to education. In addition, there are people who are in actual physical danger from the Taliban regime for whatever reason. Now, you may be aware that the International Parliamentary Network for Education, or IPNED, it's hosted by Results. IPNED works with parliamentarians around the world on the subject of access to education. Now, the Afghan parliamentarians they've been working with are potentially in great danger, and many of them are in hiding and are unwilling to speak out. Now, IPNED's staff, they've been doing all they can to check if they're okay, to help them out. This is a really difficult situation when you see people you've been working alongside being put in fear for their lives. IPNED is calling for a collective international engagement with the Taliban on the need to protect the rights and freedoms of parliamentarians, of whom a quarter of which are female. We're going to post their statement on this into the chat box. In the statement, you can see that UK MP Harriet Baldwin, who's the co-chair of IPNED, is asking parliamentarians from across the world to ask their governments to do all that they can. We're going to keep you updated on this obviously very difficult situation. In the meantime, we're very proud of the work that IPNED's doing. Because it's an advocacy organisation, it's able to speak out in a way that some NGOs that physically are working in Afghanistan can't. Now, from one very concerning situation to another, and that's on COVID-19 vaccines. Thank you to everyone who's taken action on dose sharing over the summer. It's now September, and it's estimated that Western countries will have more than 1 billion doses of COVID-19 vaccine that could be shared with countries that urgently need them by the end of the year. But to date, only around 15%, that's 15% of the doses that were agreed to be shared by rich country leaders at the G7 summit in June have actually been provided. It's a pretty poor showing. Again, we're going to post a link to a news article on that in the chat box. But even if we can get all that dose sharing going at full speed, we want to reiterate that it's really just a start. And what's vital in the longer term is for countries around the world to have sufficient capacity to produce or access their own vaccines, and for the removal of barriers that prevent this from happening, such as the intellectual property rights of pharmaceutical companies that prevent the effective transfer of technology. Now, we're going to be coming back to this in future months. There are, of course, Other concerning barriers to people actually getting the vaccines they need, including the ability of health systems to deliver vaccines safely and effectively, and also the confidence of the people in a country that this can actually happen. So in many places, the challenges are not just about the supply of vaccines. For example, this week in the office, we heard from an advocacy colleague in Zambia who reported that vaccine hesitancy there is incredibly high. People either don't trust the vaccines will work for a variety of reasons, some of which are very understandable given people's experiences to date, or they can't obtain them from their national health system. We're also told of cases of fake vaccines being distributed, which obviously has a massive knock-on effect on people's confidence. The situation is complex, and we mustn't pretend that there's one simple solution. So, as with many of the issues that we advocate on, the moral case for taking action is very easy to make, but the solutions are often complex and multifaceted. So this is a great illustration of why, as we've been saying in all of our work on health, that strong health systems are essential to delivering improved outcomes, whether we're talking about vaccinations for COVID-19 or polio, treatments for TB, or for fighting malnutrition. Critically, the development sector has to recognize that local people understand the needs of their own populations best. With that holistic approach to health and development, based on the experience and knowledge of people in the countries themselves, such as our Zambian colleagues, we're just not going to be able to succeed in a sustainable way. Now, some better news this month has been that the fight to finally eradicate polio from the planet might not have been as badly damaged by COVID-19 as feared. Just before the bank holiday break on August the 25th, we had the 1-year anniversary of the WHO Africa region being certified polio-free for at least 4 years. This was excellent news. And as many of you know, only 2 countries in the world now have this crippling disease endemic in the environment. Those are Pakistan and Afghanistan. Now, while COVID-19 has affected the timing and funding of polio eradication, it's also presented a unique opportunity to generate a collaborative global response to infectious diseases and highlight the importance of routine vaccinations. Thanks to this effect in Pakistan, for example, overall confidence in vaccines may have actually increased. Again, we're going to put a link to an article on exactly this in the chat box. Sadly, we know that the UK's funding for polio vaccination was massively cut this summer. And we hope that with the UK economy growing a bit faster than expected, the 0.5% of our national income that the UK now spends on official development assistance will go up a bit in real terms. That hopefully should create the space for vital programs such as polio eradication can be spared from some of the worst of the cuts going forward. Because even though we continue to make progress, polio, it remains an incredibly infectious disease, and the UK funding did provide an essential backstop against breakthrough infections. So there's still some way to go. Lastly, I want to mention that Black History Month is in October, and Results is planning a series of events which we will open to staff and volunteers to attend to celebrate the achievements of Black people and their contribution to life in the UK and globally. It's really important to say that our engagement with Black History Month is for everyone in Results, whatever our own backgrounds, to learn more about aspects of our shared history and culture that often haven't received the prominence they deserve and have even sometimes been repressed. We see this as an important part of our work at Results in tackling historic oppression and racism, which is intrinsically linked with people's experience of poverty and inequality around the world. So look out for announcements on that, and we'll share more as we can confirm it. That's it from me for now. I'm going to hand over to Ruthie, as always, for a roundup of all your activities from all different parts of the UK. Over to you, Ruthie.
Great, thanks, Aaron. So the roundup is a bit on the shorter side, not because you haven't been doing loads, but just because I want to make sure there's enough time to discuss the issue of nutrition. And so firstly, a big thank you to everyone who's taken action over the last few months. And there seems to have been a sudden wave of replies from the FCDO and MPs and ministers. So we're going through those and we'll be sharing them with colleagues, seeing if there's any new information in there for them. And we'll keep you in the loop about that. So please do send us any replies you get, because that helps with the overall advocacy between volunteers and staff. So the biggest thing on our minds in the grassroots team and Results at the moment is the national conference this weekend. So if you haven't already registered, it's not too late to. We've got all the sessions and speakers up on the website now, so the agenda's complete. And yeah, we're really looking forward to seeing you there, learning a lot of information, hearing from some incredible speakers, including Jeffrey Sachs and Gina Miller, and Danny, the CEO of Oxfam, who I believe we've confirmed since our last conference call. We've also got a range of workshops with campaigning skills and all sorts of things. So yeah, really hope to see you there. Details for the conference, including how to join the sessions and how to interact with each other on the forum, which we'll have on the website, will be sent out to you on Eventbrite later this week. So don't worry if you haven't got everything yet, that's coming your way. And following the conference, you may have seen earlier today, we sent out an update about the advocacy meetings. So we've got a series of advocacy meetings that start on the Tuesday after the conference, which I think is the 14th. Yeah. And these are a great opportunity and a rare opportunity to speak to civil servants and MPs on a range of issues, build a mutual understanding with them, and yeah, kind of get insider information about their work and how our advocacy works with their day-to-day jobs. So we can confirm a few of the meetings are, so we've got one about nutrition, which is very relevant for this month's campaign, with civil servants who will be looking at the programme supported by the UK Official Development Assistance Budget. We have a meeting with an MP about global education, which sort of builds on, again, some of the campaigning a lot of you did earlier this year on the pledge to the Global Partnership for Education. One with a senior advisor at FCDO about a global approach to the COVID-19 pandemic. And a final one, which has been confirmed since the email went out, which is really exciting, is with a clerk from the International Development Committee. So for those of you who weren't campaigning with us, I believe it was last year, we campaigned to keep this committee going. It's still there, and it's really important for the accountability and effectiveness of aid, which is even more important now the budget's been cut. So yeah, that's another meeting we've got lined up. So details will be in the email for signing up to those, to make sure that you can get into the calls, because they will be private, so registration is required. So that is a few of the updates I wanted to give, but we have an update, I think, from Poole, who recently ran another successful fundraiser. So have we got, I'm not sure who we're expecting.
Hello, it's Helen here.
Hi Helen, do you want me to share the photos?
Do, yes. Oh, that's nice. Right. Well, yes. Shall I go on to describe what happens?
Yeah, give us a little update. What went on?
Okay, well, we've done it several years in the past, probably 10, I should think, maybe even more. It's a way village halls can raise money to keep for their own upkeep. We give them a proportion of what we take, and they provide all the crockery, cutlery, tables, chairs, the venue basically. We love baking cakes, so that's something that is nice to do. We have, as well as the cakes and the cream and all that sort of thing, we had a tombola, we had books for sale, plants, which Deirdre grows mainly, and we had some jam, which was given to us by a local jam maker. We needed at least 6 helpers each day. It was the 2 days of a weekend. And I think the second day, fortunately, because we were very busy, we probably had about 10 people there helping, which was wonderful. You can see the cakes. They look quite nice, I think. The plants look wonderful as well. We took, or rather, we paid to results £520. We had to take a portion off that to pay for the hall, of course. It was 2 days, just 2:30 to 5:30 in the afternoon. What else happened? Oh, we did have a slight question mark. Should we use a card reader or should we stick to cash? We decided to stick to cash, and we think only 2 people went away and didn't come back because of that, because most people are still happy to use cash. Yeah, I think that's all, isn't it? Yeah, that's it really.
That's brilliant, a massive well done, and thank you. And the cakes look really tasty, and it must have been, yeah, just yeah, I can imagine. Just so nice that we're able to do that sort of thing now as well. So yeah, well done to everyone. Quite a big operation with so many people involved in helping it run.
Yeah.
So my final update was a recent blog, which is an ode to Results celebrating 35 years. So Results is 35 years this year. Results UK, that is. It was in the US before coming over the Atlantic, not that it came on a boat or anything. Anyway, moving on. To celebrate this anniversary, Sanjay had written a poem, and we've made, well, very kindly he recorded the poem. We've got a really nice video where you can listen to the poem or read it as well, and a blog accompanying that, written by Sanjay, who's been volunteering with Results for many years now. So yeah, give it a read. It's a really nice celebration, and great to hear from such a dedicated campaigner as well from the Cheshire group. So that's all from me. I'll hand over to Aaron and hopefully see you on the weekend.
Thanks, Ruthie, and thanks to everybody. Special thanks to the pool group. Love the photos, and just really looks like you had a really fun time raising some unrestricted money, which is really like gold dust for us. It's really special to get that. Thank you a lot. So let's jump on to the topic of tonight's call, which is global nutrition. Now, this is the 3rd time this year we'll have asked you to take action on what is an absolutely foundational issue for people's lifelong health, education, and being able to access economic opportunities. Without good nutrition, especially in the early years of life, many children will never develop properly, either physically or mentally, which of course has knock-on effects on the economic development of countries where the burden of poor nutrition is really high. Many of you have campaigned tirelessly on this over many years, and some of you will be aware of how the UK government has historically been absolutely central to global efforts to improve nutrition, what's called the Nutrition for Growth agenda, that we'll hear more about from our speaker this evening in just a minute. I'm not going to steal their thunder, but what I do want to say is a bit about the progress and challenges we've seen recently on nutrition in relation to the UK government specifically. Nutrition programs have been disproportionately negatively affected by the aid cuts, but we still think that it's crucial to expect the UK to pledge financial resources to nutrition later this year. We see this as a realistic ask, and our action materials explain how we think this can and must work to continue making an impact on child nutrition around the world at the levels we've been doing in the past, to continue to work towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. I'd also like to point out that we did make some real progress thanks to your efforts back in May. It was from the letters that you shared with us that we discovered that the nutrition team in the FCDO are actually working on guidance for the rest of the department on how to build nutrition programs that demonstrably have impact. That guidance includes building nutrition indicators into a wide range of programs that also address other development priorities such as education, agriculture, water and sanitation, or climate change. So as you can imagine, we're following this very closely, and I hope it's something you can ask more about at some of the advocacy meetings that you've heard about from Ruthie as part of the National Conference and associated advocacy days. I always love it when we find out about things first before anybody else in the sector because of work that you guys have done. It really makes a difference. So thank you for the difference your campaigning is making, even in these really challenging times. So look, to speak to us tonight about the importance of the Nutrition for Growth agenda, we're delighted to have with us Meaza, Getachew, who's a global policy and advocacy manager at 1000 Days. Now, 1000 Days is a non-profit organization working in the US and around the world to ensure that women and children have the healthiest first 1000 days. Meaza supports the organization's global nutrition advocacy efforts through coordinating the International Coalition for Advocacy on Nutrition, or ICAN, to drive greater action and investment in global nutrition. She also represents 1000 Days within the Global Breastfeeding Collective, advancing the organization's global breastfeeding advocacy efforts. Importantly, before joining 1000 Days, Meaza worked with Results Educational Fund in the US, they're our sister organization there, supporting the Secretariat team of the Action Global Health Advocacy Partnership, of which Results UK is a proud member. So Meaza, we're so glad to have you back with us tonight. Welcome home.
Thank you so much, Aaron. Yes, it's great to be back on a grassroots call. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So thank you for joining us. From Washington, DC, I think, is that right?
Actually, I did recently move up a bit north to Baltimore, Maryland, to be a little bit closer to family. I think one of the more positive aspects of this situation we find ourselves in. But yes, our organization is still based in DC.
Great. Well, look, we're really grateful that you've taken time out of your busy day to come and talk to us. So let me just quickly introduce you to people on this call. I mean, you've been on the call so far, so you've got some idea, but, you know, results campaigners, volunteers from right around the United Kingdom, from Scotland to the South Coast. Lots of people are very familiar with advocating on nutrition and over other global health issues, been doing so for many years, but some not so, and some who are brand new, starting tonight and starting to learn potentially for the first time about international development issues. Now, we always start these calls with 3 pre-arranged questions, which we've shared with our guest speaker in advance. But before that, I'd like to ask Meaza to share a little bit more about her background. Can you tell us a bit about what your professional role entails? And the most important question, what motivated you personally to get involved with nutrition?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Aaron. So yeah, my name is Meaza Getachew. As Aaron said, I work with 1000 Days. We are a global advocacy organization, and we do exactly what your grassroots team is also aiming to do, but based in the US. So we focus our advocacy to the US government to influence them to increase their policy and financial resources to improve nutrition for all. So personally, I think a lot of my interest in the issue actually stemmed from my early work with Results US. So as Aaron mentioned, I was part of the Results family. I was supporting the Action Global Health Partnership in a lot of their fundraising and program development work. And I was able to just sort of deepen my my connections and my personal expertise in the policy and advocacy space, and seeing the power that advocacy can have to influencing how money is being spent at a global level. Directly working with policymakers on issues like poverty and good nutrition. And also, from some lived experience as well. I was actually born in Ethiopia. So I have understood what lack of access to health services and proper nutrition can have on populations around the world, particularly women and girls who live in under-resourced countries. Yeah, I think that covers some of that, Aaron.
Thanks so much. I always love to hear what motivates our guest speaker and how they got into the things that they're passionate about development. It's really good to hear your story. Let's jump straight into the first of our pre-arranged questions before we open it up to the floor. But when we do get to that, you might want to make a note of this. We'll put it in the chat too. Anybody that prefers to text in a question, maybe you can't get to the keyboard. The number for doing that tonight is 0777 56 11178. That's 0777 56 11178, and somebody will drop that in the chat in a moment. But we're going to go straight to the first question for the evening, which I believe is coming from the Sheffield group. Do we have Sheffield?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Is malnutrition around the world getting better or worse?
Thanks for that question, Rebecca. So, hunger and malnutrition have definitely been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of the disruptions due to lockdowns and people having access to critical resources like health services that often also deliver proper nutrition to affected communities. However, we know that this crisis has existed long before the COVID-19 pandemic. In an average year, about 3.1 million children die from malnutrition or malnutrition-related conditions. And I did a little bit of research to figure out what this would mean in a UK context. But this actually is more than the populations of Bristol, Liverpool, and Birmingham combined. So that's quite staggering. As I understand, those are some pretty populous cities within the UK context. So when we advocate on malnutrition and hunger issues, it's pretty important for us to be clear to policymakers on exactly what we're talking about as it relates to hunger and malnutrition. So just to provide a bit of a definition, the World Health Organization defines malnutrition as deficiencies, excesses, or imbalances in a person's intake of energy and/or nutrients. So the term malnutrition actually encompasses three broader groups of conditions that include undernutrition, which you often will hear as wasting, stunting, or underweight, micronutrient deficiencies, which are the inadequate intake of vitamins or minerals, and these can actually lead to conditions such as anemia, as well as overweight, obesity, and the resulting diet-related and non-communicable diseases, or NCDs. And often these NCDs can lead to longer-term life conditions such as, heart disease, diabetes, as well as cancer, as research shows. So nutrition, proper nutrition plays a critical role in a lot of the preventative aspects of proper health. Because of this, sort of encompassing problem of malnutrition, our global advocacy partners often talk about malnutrition as a compounding problem of social health and economic and environmental conditions. So one example that we use is poverty is actually a major driver of malnutrition, particularly amongst women and girls who in many under-resourced contexts often eat less and are often, having to prepare food. So their proper nutritional needs might not be being met given their empowerment and where they are in the overall societal fabric in their communities. And, while the UK government, they've contributed crucial dollars pounds towards famine relief. And, when we speak of famine, it's often the acute inaccess to food. So this often results from conflict or environmental disasters that lead to rising spikes in hunger, which COVID has also led to, as we've seen over the especially early period of the pandemic, where early lockdowns led to a lot of economic disasters around the world. So these more humanitarian actions are definitely critical, but we're not really seeing the much needed scale up of the more development aspects of the prevention and treatment of malnutrition. And these actions, like increasing breastfeeding support or providing women in low resource contexts with proper vitamins such as iron, folic acid during their pregnancies, those interventions lead to more sustainable and longer term good nutrition for everyone around the world. Maybe I'll just say a couple numbers of how we're seeing COVID-19 impacting a lot of the sort of figures and statistics that we use in our advocacy with policymakers. So we're seeing that evidence has shown that by 2022, an additional 13.6 million children globally could suffer from wasting, which is one of the more acute forms of malnutrition. 3.6 more children could suffer from stunting, and that's when children are too short for their age. Because of this, an additional 283,000 more children could die from malnutrition. And this is on top of, the already inequities to access to safe, affordable, nutritious foods that we've seen in the world that's led to this crisis.
Thanks, Meaza. That's some sobering numbers there in terms of the raw numbers, but also compared to the annual birth cohort, of children being born each year. These are measurable percentages, and when we consider how unevenly distributed a lot of that is around the world as well, that gets to be even higher numbers. Let's jump across to Linlithgow up in Scotland for our second question. Do we have someone from Linlithgow?
Yes, Aaron, it's William Ross, and my question to Meaza is, please can she tell us how Nutrition for Growth works and why it is an important way to support nutrition programs?
Thanks, William. Definitely, this is an area of work that I've been really collaborating with organizations like Results in the UK and other critical partners around donor markets in the world. So the Nutrition for Growth, or N4G opportunity, is a global pledging moment that aims to drive greater action towards ending malnutrition in all its forms, to help ensure that everyone around the world have their human right to safe and nutritious foods so that they can reach their full potential. And to put this into context, the UK government actually was a major leader in the first N4G summit, which was held in 2013 in London alongside the Olympics in 2012, where over 100 stakeholders endorsed the global N4G compact and pledged more than $23 billion US dollars towards nutrition projects around the world. So this year, which has actually been deemed the Nutrition Year of Action, N4G continues to spearhead the effort to end malnutrition in all its forms. And this will be at the Tokyo N4G Summit that's being hosted by the government of Japan virtually, December 7th and 8th. This year's summit, its goals is actually focusing on the critical roles and the interlinkages between food sector, health, and social protection systems, and how they work together to deliver good nutrition for all. So the reason why this is a critical, advocacy milestone for our global partners, and we're actually calling for governments to use this as a political forum to increase their either financial resources or their political resources towards ending malnutrition. So the aim is to influence how they use data-driven financial and policy commitments towards reaching some of the major sustainable development goals by 2030. And this comes at a time actually where the protection of good nutrition for all can have real impacts on how we're able to contain the COVID-19 virus, as well as we know that proper nutrition is linked to, especially in the early years, is linked to building good immunity in the long term. I'll also just quickly mention, that this summit comes at the midway point of the United Nations Decade of Action on Nutrition, which is a global sort of mobilizing effort to get governments around the world to really take nutrition as a critical development and health issue. We also only have 5 years left to achieve the World Health Assembly targets, and these are the global targets that governments like the UK use to decide how to actually distribute funding towards effective, particularly cost-effective nutrition services towards maternal, infant, and young child nutrition. And more generally, we have 10 years to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. And we know that nutrition is critical to other areas of development, like attaining good education, and generally women's empowerment as well. So I'll just pause there, and hopefully that got to the bigger question there, William.
Thanks, Meaza. Let's jump straight into our third question from Stort Valley. Who do we have from Stort Valley tonight?
We have Pete. I
Hi,
haven't
Pete.
heard back from my partners. I think they've disappeared. Oh no, I see one on screen. Jill, hello. Question 3. Given that the UK has recently cut its aid programme, I hate saying that, including its nutrition programmes, can you advise us on the arguments we should use to persuade them to make a financial pledge to Nutrition for Growth?
Yes, sorry, I just muted myself there. Yes, it's definitely, it's an unfortunate situation. The UK government historically has been a leading donor on nutrition issues. And now's not really the time to cut back on such critical development priorities when we find ourselves in the middle of a global health pandemic. So within our advocacy networks, we have gone through a number of different framings for the nutrition issue, and maybe to also relate a little bit, as I mentioned earlier, 1,000 Days does do direct advocacy to the US government. And you may know that we just went through 4 years of an administration that didn't really prioritize issues like good nutrition and development. And so our advocacy focused a lot around the protection of these critical programs and using framing such as how cost-effective good nutrition interventions are. So for example, we know that leading economists around the world, they consistently rank nutrition interventions as not only the most cost-effective forms of development, but also some of the cheapest. So just to put that into some numbers, every $1 invested into nutrition programs around the world can lead to up to $35 of economic returns to those local economies. And we know that these economic improvements, not only do they affect individuals, but they can also accrue at the community and the societal level. So these are sustainable interventions that are being made. Another sort of issue that we dig into in our advocacy is actually putting the issue of malnutrition a bit more into context. So it can be sometimes a bit of a technical world, and that's sometimes an issue that we face with some policymakers. There are so many different forms of malnutrition, but sometimes it's helpful to actually describe what these dollars are contributing to. So 2 terms that we use are nutrition specific and nutrition sensitive interventions. So nutrition specific interventions are the interventions that impact the direct health outcomes of individuals and communities. So in the nutrition world, this includes promoting dietary diversity, so ensuring that populations and individuals are eating as many different foods that can help improve their daily nutrients as possible. It also includes promoting activities like breastfeeding, especially in the first 6 months of life, because we know that breastfeeding is critical to building long-term immunity as well as cognitive development in children. The other side of the nutrition projects that we advocate on include nutrition sensitive. And these interventions are the sort of those that try to get at the underlying aspects of why we have the issue of malnutrition in the first place. So this includes the conditions that lead individuals to experience poverty, such as access to access to broader health services, housing, jobs. It also includes, improving agricultural practices and how the kinds of foods that we're growing and how we are actually ensuring that people have access and the ability to afford safe and nutritious foods. So those are some of the examples that we dig into when we try to put this issue into context for policymakers. And it's been effective when trying to relate the issue to how the policymakers, constituents within, their districts themselves might be facing as well, because the issue of malnutrition is actually an issue that every region in the world faces when you put it into some of that context.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Also, I'm sorry, could I also quickly mention, I know the UK government is hosting the climate conference in a few months. And, the COP conference is actually a critical opportunity for trying to not only respond to the climate crisis, but also help contain the sort of, tragic impacts that it's already had on many communities. And we see often that communities that are impacted by climate disasters are also linked to those that face inadequate access to safe, affordable, nutritious foods. So it might be also helpful to put this into context, because clearly, climate is an issue that the UK government is aiming to prioritize, but we can't do that without addressing good and proper nutrition for all.
Thanks, Meaza. And I think, one of the things that that we are looking through, it's interesting you mentioned the COP, the Climate Council of Parties, the United Nations climate talks happening in Glasgow later this year. And I put a question in the chat. Here we go, which is from Alexander. Do you want to read that out, actually, rather than have me read it out? I'm quite happy for you to do that if you like, or I can.
Okay, yes. What impacts will global warming and climate change have on nutrition in the future? I am assuming it may become more difficult to grow enough crops to sustain a larger population when we have more children being born.
Thanks for that question. I don't have the exact number offhand, but there was actually a study, I think that came out last year, that looked at the actual impacts that CO2 emissions can have on the yields of nutritious crops. And it was a significant number. I'm going to find it and I'll share it in the chat. But yes, your assumption is in fact something that scientists and economists are exploring. And so it's critical when we're trying to adapt to climate change and the sort of policies, the climate change adaptation policies that governments are currently debating on. They also do need to take into account how those programs will support farmers, particularly smallholder farmers, to protect their crops and to actually adapt their crops to be able to sustain proper nutrition for themselves and for their communities as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So I think it's really interesting. As I mentioned earlier, we are asking everybody to help us build the political pressure needed here in the UK to get the government to commit adequate resources to nutrition programs in line with their previous commitment. And given the political moment of the COP, that's an interesting link and thing that we've just started to explore. I mean, I think it's because of the cuts, it's very clear that this is a much harder ask than it would have been if we were doing this a year ago. But we definitely believe that there's mileage in doing this. And do remember that results never asks you to take campaign action just for the sake of it. We always ensure the campaign is one where there's genuine reasons to believe that political pressure on it is going to stand a good chance of making a difference. So let's keep digging into this. Again, the number to text questions in if you'd prefer to do that is 0777 56 11178. That's 0777 56 11178. Or alternatively, go ahead and type stuff in the chat box, and we'll go to verbal questions as well if we've got time. One of the questions I think would be good for us to take a quick look at is the one from Carrie in the Big Onion, Birmingham. She asks, well, Carrie, do you want to ask it? I know you'd like to. We're coming live from Carrie's backyard.
I like to talk, as it were. Hello, Meaza, lovely to see you. My question is, 1,000 days is your title. Would you explain to us why 1,000 days is such an important number?
Yes, happy to. So Yes, 1,000 Days is the name of the organization that I work with, actually. And the reason why we chose that name is because a few years ago, there was a huge paper that came out in the Lancet paper. I don't know if you're familiar with the Lancet, that it was a groundbreaking study that showed the importance of the first 1,000 days between a woman's pregnancy and a child's second birthday. And that window is not only a powerful window to influence the future of a child's ability to reach their full potential, but it's also a critical window to protect the good health and nutrition for women themselves, as so that they are able to sustain their good health. So that's the sort of the reason why that we chose that name, and sort of like the scientific importance of the first 1,000 days.
Thanks, Meaza. So we've got another question in the chat from Peter. What are the 3 main pathways by which good nutrition is delivered? Well, it's actually 3 questions. Let's do them all, and you can then pick and choose what is going to be, because I'm conscious of time. We can't use all the time on Peter's questions. Other people will ask them too. Well, but the main pathways by which good nutrition is delivered. How do we counteract the influence of companies that promote formula milk, which I think that could take the whole time. So maybe short answer to that one. And how do we ensure that the better crops actually get to the people living in the worst poverty?
Yeah, those are very important questions, and I will attempt to tackle all 3 of them very quickly. So I don't know if I could call out exactly 3 main pathways for delivering good nutrition, only because of how sort of multi-sectoral the problem is. But critically, good nutrition and nutrition services, they need to be scaled up and delivered through national levels. So we always are calling for governments and countries within that actually are burdened with malnutrition to scale up the importance of nutrition within their communities, and to commit the policy needed and the sort of financial resources needed to deliver proper nutrition services. And we often see that those specific interventions being delivered through the community level. So sometimes it's through community healthcare workers. So they're a critical force within this, the broader development and global health system. And of course, through food systems as well, and food sector actors. And to tie that into the next question, food sector actors do include the bigger multinational corporations like Nestle and like other companies that promote and oftentimes in very powerful ways try and influence how mothers choose to feed their infants. And we've seen historically how that's impacted malnutrition and has increased the inability for the proper evidence and the proper scientific information to be flowed to the communities that need them the most. So that said, N4G is actually an opportunity for action from governments on breastfeeding. And I'm happy to paste quickly the resources that we're using to call for governments to improve not only the health environments, but also the social and market environments that we could influence to promote good breastfeeding. And the last question, sorry, what was it? I just lost the window.
How do we ensure that the better crops are actually getting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So one system that we often advocate on are like cash programs. So actually giving low-income communities the money needed to buy those nutritious crops themselves. That way it ensures that they're able to directly access the safe, affordable, nutritious foods needed. And they don't have to make the decisions of how to spend that funding and how to spend that money within their family, because we know they might be dealing with other sort of economic factors that lead to the malnutrition issue itself. I hope
this is like charity.
It could be, but you know, in the nutrition space, it's like specific programs that give oftentimes women, because we know women in these settings are the economic decision makers of their families. So giving them the cash transfers needed to specifically buy nutritious foods, or products like fortified flour, for example, that delivers the vitamins needed for their families. So it's a bit more specific than just charity in itself, but of course, charity like food aid is critical, and particularly in famine contexts where we see rising spikes of hunger.
Can you give us a link to a program where something like that is working?
Oh yeah, I was actually, I don't want to forget. Let me first link, here's the resource for the issue on breastfeeding. And why N4G, this year's summit is a critical moment for governments to also focus on that issue. I'm trying to think of, what was the other resource you asked for, Peter? Sorry.
It was to do with how women are being encouraged, or giving money to buy more nutritious
Yes, cash
ingredients.
transfer programs. Yep, I'm happy to follow up on that.
Cool.
Great, very good questions. We've got 7 minutes left, so let's see what else we can cram in. I think we've got a real richness of resources coming online to explore in a bit more depth later, which is always really good. Jill wanted to just do a quick fact check. Is it that 3.1 million children die from malnutrition each year? That seems incredible. Meaza, do you want to provide a little bit of context and nuance to that? You'll need to go off mute first, unfortunately.
I am muted, thank you. I try to only do that once per day, and that was my once today, so there we go. Yes, so the 3.1 million figure, yeah, it's definitely quite tragic. So what I'll go through right now is actually the numbers that we know of prior to the potential impacts of COVID-19. So we know that more broadly, improper nutrition underpins nearly half of global child deaths. So these are under 5 child deaths, which is one of the sort of indicators that we use in the development space to help reach some of our global targets. More specifically, an estimated 149 million children are not receiving the proper nutrition that they need to grow properly based off their age. And that's a condition called stunting. And this leads to longer-term chronic undernourishment, which we know scientifically evidence has showed leads to the cognitive development of children being impaired. Another context I can provide is 49 million children are wasted, and this condition is when children are underweight for their height developmentally. So this, of course, requires proper treatment of nutrition. So the projects that we advocate to governments is trying to encompass both the sort of prevention and overall treatment of all forms of malnutrition. Another form of malnutrition to provide context on is child and adult obesity and overweight. And more specifically in children, we know that improper nutrition in the next decade is estimated to lead to 40 million infants and young children to be affected by overweight and obesity. And not only is this in low economic settings, but it's also in high economic contexts as well, middle and high economic contexts, like countries like the UK and the US. So this is an issue that is, hit all regions of the world, specifically overweight and obesity.
Thanks, Meaza. We've only got 4 minutes left. I just wanted to flag, we've got a bit of a conversation going on in the chat about trying to determine the denominator to compare some of these other numbers too, where we've got 140 million children, 149 million children who are stunted, 49 million children wasted at a particular point in time. Is by children, are we talking about people under the age of 16, under the age of 18? Is there a definition there?
Yep. So for 1,000 days, the numbers we use focus on children under the age of 5 as a developmental milestone. Of course, there are other age groups that are critical, such as adolescents. Reaching adolescent girls with good and proper nutrition is also another major age group that nutrition projects aim to reach.
Great, that's really good. And I would like to also flag, just in the last couple of minutes, I think a question from Jill: can you point me to something on nutrition in women and children, please? And Mathilde, one of our in-house nutrition experts at Results UK, has very helpfully, bit of a plug, put a link to one of our own recent resources, why malnutrition is sexist, the determinants of nutrition for women and girls. So some great research in there. Mathilde's also put in another great link, nutrition is critical, why we must act now to tackle child nutrition, malnutrition. And I think in the last couple of minutes, just to sort of bring this all together, I mean, I think what we've really heard tonight, and Meaza, thank you so much for your really great insight and knowledge on this, sharing that and with such passion with us, is that the need in the world is huge. And all the statistics, virtually all the statistics we heard tonight were pre-COVID. And we know that countries have been absolutely slammed by COVID, and many development indicators, including nutrition, are expected to move in the wrong direction very rapidly the next time we start to get statistics and numbers produced, which in some places will take a while, particularly given for things like nutrition. Sometimes you can see quite a long delay in terms of the reporting because of the way that nutrition affects the body over a long time. So the need in the world is really, really great. And I think when that comes time to be doing the action and looking at what we need the UK government to do, the kind of links we can make to our priorities, to the other things that we're talking about in development that the government has as its priorities around things like the COP and other commitments that it's made, the legacy of the London Nutrition for Growth back 2013 and so on. There's lots and lots of different hooks and ways that we can be pushing them to prioritize this up the agenda. It's super, super powerful and super important to be able to do that. I'm really so sorry, but we have completely run out of time. It's just gone 10 p.m. Meaza, so thank you so much for joining us this evening. A big thank you to you.
Yes, thanks so much, Erin. It was really great joining you all today. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Thank you, and to you too. To everybody else on the call, thank you so much for your ongoing advocacy efforts and support of the eradication of global poverty. Thank you for standing alongside Results in this important journey. If you're able to, please do take this month's action in the run-up to the Nutrition for Growth Summit. Thank you and good luck. And most of all, I hope I'm going to see all of you at the National Conference this weekend on either Saturday or Sunday or both. It's going to be really great. Our speakers are incredible this year. And yeah, it's going to be a really, really fun time. Okay, goodbye for now. Enjoy the rest of your evenings, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care, folks.